And I have said, I want to change this country spectacularly in 3 years. So I don't have 10 years. I don't have 5 years. I don't have 6 months to decide whether or not and go to court. No, I don't have that time. People, yourselves, need accommodation. And if I'm going to submit myself to a process that will take me 10 years to deliver accommodation to you, then I would have failed you, and failed you spectacularly. So what do? We need to ensure that there's transparency, there's openness, there's accountability in each and every process that we undertake. No doubt, that is not negotiable, and that there is no corruption. And so people say,
okay, let's dive in. Imagine this. A country aiming to build, 100,000 houses in just 3 years?
Yeah, it's pretty striking.
Or think about this. Earning 20,000 currency units puts you in the top 1% of earners. That gives you a picture, right?
It really does. And these details come from the source we're looking at today, a speech transcript.
Exactly. From the 20th Senior Officer Strategic Conference of the Botswana Defence Force. Quite a specific source.
Very specific. And it gives us this really direct look at a vision for, rapid national transformation. It's quite multifaceted.
So that when these allegations are flung about, because one is seeking to move from an entrenched system of corruption to something that offers us some redemption, yet you are able to interrogate the allegation.
So our mission today is to really unpack this transcript you shared. It's our only source for this deep dive. And we want to pull out the key ideas, understand its vision, governance, social stuff, the military, the economy, all through the speaker's own words. Get straight to the source's perspective.
And that perspective comes across with a real sense of urgency and scale. You feel it right away.
Absolutely. So let's jump right into that. This vision for rapid transformation, the core promise.
Yeah.
It's bold.
It is. Change this country spectacularly in 3 years. That's
3 years for spectacular change. That's incredibly fast for national projects.
It's an extraordinarily tight deadline, especially given the breadth of what's being proposed. The speaker is very clear they reject slow processes.
Right. I remember seeing that line, I don't have that time. Like 10 years for housing, that's a failure in their view.
Exactly. No time for lengthy legal holdups either, it seems, if they impede delivery. Speed is presented as absolutely critical.
So how do they plan to do this quickly and maintain good governance? Because the source hits that hard too.
It does. It lays out these non-negotiables: transparency, openness, accountability, and zero tolerance for corruption.
And it's not just buzzwords, is it? There's that part where the speaker invites people to check on their relatives.
Yeah, I want you to know my relatives.
Yeah.
You need to know them so that you can track whether anyone has any tender. That's pretty direct.
It's basically asking the public to help police this entrenched system of corruption they mention. Very unusual.
It is. And this connects to another interesting concept mentioned, humility and self-correction, even with this urgent vision.
Ah, yes, the buff code part. That phrase stood out.
Described as appreciating your own sort of frailties, brokenness, fallibility.
Okay, so acknowledging you might be wrong. But hang on, how does that score with the need for speed? Acting decisively. Seems like a tension there.
That's the core tension, isn't it?
Right.
The source suggests operating in a, quote, sane and sober environment means you have to recognize you can be wrong.
So engage with different views, admit mistakes.
Exactly. Even publicly, if facts from an analyst show a policy is wrong, the speaker says they thank them and reassess publicly. It's about distinguishing, facts and accurate information from analysts versus what's called speculation, rumor, gossip, absurdity.
Yeah.
So the idea seems to be move fast, but be grounded in facts and ready to pivot if the facts change.
Okay, I see. Fast but flexible, based on data. Let's shift gears then. Social challenges, because the ambition there seems just as high. Housing, wealth distribution.
Yes, the Bono housing scheme. This stated goal is huge. Home ownership for all citizens. No person without a decent house. That's the vision.
And they link this housing issue directly to the wider economy, don't they? To this low-wage economy problem.
Precisely. Which they say leads to poverty, especially in retirement. And that statistic you mentioned earlier really drives it home.
The 20,000 currency units putting someone in the top 1%.
Yeah. It highlights the kind of structural economic disparity they feel needs addressing.
And the Buno scheme is positioned as a major solution. That target, 100,000 houses in 3 years. Or was it 2?
Well, the speaker mentions 3, but also notes a minister suggested maybe even 2. Either way, it's massive.
How's it meant to work? The rollout?
The plan is building in every single constituency, a minimum of 1,000 houses in each. The goal is enabling land development at a, quote, reasonable monthly cost to make ownership possible.
And the underlying thinking here is really explicit in the source, this idea of government's obligation.
Yes, to deliberately transfer wealth, to claw it back, and put it in the hands of the most ordinary of our citizens.
That's strong language, not just facilitating the economy, but actively redistributing wealth through things like this housing scheme.
It's framed exactly like that, a direct mechanism for wealth transfer as a government duty.
When we engage on any issue, and you assess. That's why you do recon. You collect data. You assess it critically. You examine it from different perspectives.
Okay, now this speech was given to the Defense Force, the BDF. So let's talk about how the source frames their role, because it seems to be evolving.
Right. The core mission is reaffirmed first. Security, accountability, meritocracy, formidable capability, exemplary character, being a pillar of peace and progress.
And that character bit includes respecting human rights and the rule of law, both on and off duty, it says.
Yes, fundamental. And a big point mentioned is finalizing a comprehensive national security strategy.
Oh, okay. What's the goal of that?
To create a clear framework, really, for responding to threats, internal and external, allocating resources effectively, building resilience, clarifying who does what across government.
But the source also hints at difficulties in getting the strategy done. Something about lack of consensus.
It does mention that. Lack of consensus, common ground, vision,
Right.
listed as obstacles. It shows that pulling together a unified national strategy isn't always simple. Needs navigating different views.
I see.
And tied to strategy is resources. There's a concern raised about past defense budgets being cut drastically for other things. A warning about potential suffering if the nation isn't prepared.
So look at the region, prepare now, don't wait. That seems to be the message. Resist those budget cuts.
Pretty much. Preparedness is key. And the BDF's role isn't just borders and strategy. It extends outwards and inwards.
Oh, so?
Well, outwards. Botswana's peacekeeping contributions, Samim in Mozambique, Sami DRC, are highlighted, seen as proof of commitment to regional stability.
Right, building trust, collective security, diplomatic influence.
Exactly, and enhances Botswana's standing. Then inwards within society, there's progress noted on gender integration in the BDF.
Active participation of women, a gender integration office, linked to operational efficiency.
Yes, and linked to that perhaps is how seriously the source treats gender-based violence, domestic violence, things like that.
How seriously?
They're explicitly called serious threats to national security, development, social cohesion, right up there with external threats.
Wow, that really elevates the issue. So what's the BDF's role in tackling that?
The source is clear. The oath BDF members take means they cannot be perpetrators. They must show discipline, be examples in society, lead the fight against GBV. Protecting the country includes protecting society from these internal harms.
So a dual responsibility, external defense, internal protection of the social fabric. Got it. The source also talks about the welfare of BDF members themselves, right?
Yes, the speaker directly acknowledges challenges facing soldiers and civilian staff in the force.
Like what specifically?
Conditions of service come up, operational readiness, social welfare issues, which it says are getting worse with the changing environment.
But there's a commitment mentioned from the government.
Yes, an assurance that the government is committed to properly equipping and resourcing the military and looking at these concerns with an open mind.
Other specific things mentioned were pensions, right, and early retirement.
Correct. And interestingly, on retirement age, the source suggests a need for public discussion. Is the current age still right? Again, that hint of consultation.
Along with things like accommodation, healthcare, and crucially, equipment maintenance and replacement.
All highlighted as needing attention. That call for public chat on retirement age. It echoes that earlier point about humility. seeking input, doesn't it?
It does. Interesting. Okay, so moving on. How does the source link the BDF to the wider economy? What's their economic impact?
Well, first, BDF members are positioned as gatekeepers of their profession, expected to serve diligently, protect life. That trust is baseline.
And that baseline of trust and security that has direct economic consequences.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The source draws a straight line. The peace and security provided by the BDF is the essential foundation for economic growth. It makes Botswana attractive to foreign investors.
Ah, that anecdote comes in here, doesn't it? About the investor loving the country's fundamental niceness.
Exactly. And the speaker interprets that niceness not just as politeness, but as something constructed on the peace and stability guaranteed by a disciplined military.
So the BDF is the bedrock.
Explicitly called the bulwark of safety and security peace. That bulwark allows people to enjoy their rights, and that's what attracts investment and lets the economy thrive. It's fundamental.
A very direct link. Okay, finally, the source looks forward, talks about innovation, even building a defense industry.
Yeah, this ties into a broader push for what's called a knowledge or experimental economy, one that needs, vigorous experimentation, innovation, creativity, challenging the status quo.
And the BDF is being called on to be part of this, to innovate.
Definitely. Encouraged to embrace technology, develop homegrown solutions, constantly refine tactics through fresh thinking.
And this internal innovation could lead to something bigger, like a whole new industry.
That's the vision. That BDF innovation could be the seed for a domestic defense industry.
Why? What would be the benefits?
Shorten supply chains, obviously.
Yeah.
Increase self-sufficiency. And contribute directly to economic development. Create jobs, build technical capacity.
And this isn't just wishful thinking. There are steps being taken.
Seems so. The source mentions a directive to prioritize a feasibility study on setting up this industry. And it stresses the BDF's technical input is crucial.
And the term military-industrial complex is actually used.
It is, quite directly, with the comment that it needs developing quickly and will require legal changes. So there's intent there.
And importantly, this new industry could offer opportunities for BDF members leaving service.
Yes, that's presented as a key potential benefit, a way to use their skills and experience, shifting from active duty to supporting the force through industry, a career pathway, potentially.
That really ties things together, leveraging military expertise for national economic and security goals. A neat loop.
It connects security needs, economic goals, and personnel welfare all into one strategic picture.
So wrapping this up, this deep dive into just one speech transcript.
No.
Wow. It paints this picture of an incredibly ambitious, wide-ranging vision for Botswana.
It really does.
From fighting corruption and huge social programs like the Bono housing to evolving the military's role in internal security, GBV, international peacekeeping, while also looking after troop welfare.
And then positioning the BDF as absolutely central to economic stability and future growth through investment and innovation, maybe even a new defense industry.
Understanding how all these pieces are presented as interconnected and with such urgency in the speaker's own words, it gives you a really rich insight into the national strategy being laid out.
It's much more than just a military conference speech, clearly. It's a blueprint for national transformation, as they see.
Truly is. And maybe a final thought for you, our listener, to mull over as you reflect on this. We heard this intense focus on speed, decisive action, sometimes even suggesting bypassing slower processes.
That urgency.
But we also heard these strong calls for humility, for admitting when you're wrong, even publicly, and for seeking broad consultation like on the national security strategy or retirement age. So how does a leader or a nation actually balance that intense drive for speed and decisive results with the stated values of transparency, collaboration, and course correction? What are the real-world challenges, the friction points in trying to make those two things coexist effectively? Something to think about.
And I have said, I want to change this country spectacularly in 3 years. So I don't have 10 years. I don't have 5 years. I don't have 6 months to decide whether or not and go to court. No, I don't have that time. People, yourselves, need accommodation.